The ring around Mars glittered like a chain of fire, sunlight catching its polished hull segments as transports drifted between docking spines. Families strolled through parks suspended in artificial gravity, merchants argued in crowded markets, and students floated down transparent corridors that looked out across the red planet below. Life thrived in a structure once considered impossible, a habitat large enough to hold nearly 1 million souls, balanced between commerce, science, and the quiet presence of Earth's defense fleet. Deep within the administrative hub, the council chamber sat at the heart of the ring's inner arc. The chamber was vast, circular, ringed by glass that dimmed against the glare of Marsrise. Delegates from Earth and the colonies filled tiered rows. A line of guards stood by the doors, armor matte and utilitarian, hands clasped on stun rifles that looked small against the looming tension in the air. At the center table, President Elena Varga waited with the patience of a woman used to crises. Silver hair pulled back tight, her eyes gave away nothing, though her fingers pressed firmly against the surface of the console as though holding down the weight of the entire solar system. On her right sat Admiral Ryan Holt, his navy blues pressed sharp, jaw locked as though carved from steel. Beside him, Dr. Mina Koral adjusted her data slate, a scholar whose expertise in cultures and histories of first contact had made her indispensable. Across from her, Dr. Javed Al-Rami flicked through schematics projected above his wristband, a man who believed survival hinged on understanding alien technology as much as building human ingenuity. The chamber lights dimmed. A low vibration rolled through the floor, not from the ring's engines, but from the resonance of something vast docking outside. An instant later, the ceiling iris opened to reveal a projection feed. The first image of the envoy filled the chamber. The Thaler stepped forward first. Towering, armor like sculpted plates of bronze fused with flesh, his face hidden behind a lattice mask etched with sigils. Each movement clanged as if he carried a forge within his body. Behind him loomed the Vatan representative, draped in a cloak woven with shimmering company seals, his thin frame almost swallowed by the weight of gleaming medallions. And at their side hovered the Dravari envoy, a figure whose form seemed fractured, bone-white limbs connected by strands of pale light, eyes black and depthless as if staring through time itself. No one in the chamber spoke. The silence broke when the Thaler's voice thundered, distorted through translators. "Humans! The Imperium extends to you the strength of order. Accept our protection, and the storms of raiders and rivals will never touch you again. Reject us, and you will stand naked before the void." He lifted a massive arm, bronze plates shifting with the motion. "Join as a cohort, submit your fleets to our command, and your people will live beneath the banner of unity." The Vatan envoy stepped forward with a smile too wide, his voice smooth as silk over a blade. "The Combine offers prosperity beyond your wildest projections. We control the lanes that bind 1,000 worlds. With us, your colonies will never hunger, your industries will never stall. In return, you will pledge your labor, your loyalty, and your future revenues. Debt is the price of survival, a price you will gladly pay." The Dravari's tone was neither loud nor soft. It simply existed, reverberating in the skull like a thought whispered from within. "Knowledge is all. We hold archives of civilizations you cannot imagine, of sciences you would spend millennia chasing. We offer them freely if you will unburden yourselves of the chains of tradition and the noise of cultural delusion. Shed your myths. Become rational. Become part of us." The chamber shivered. The offers glittered with temptation, safety, wealth, enlightenment. Each came with its hidden noose. Elena Varga rose slowly. She rested her palms on the table and regarded the envoys without a flicker of fear. You offer protection, prosperity, knowledge, but you demand our command, our labor, our identity. You speak of survival as though it is a gift you alone can give." She paused, letting the silence sharpen her words. "Humanity has fought for choice across every continent of Earth. We will not surrender that birthright among the stars." Dr. Corall leaned forward, her voice calm, her accent clipped. "Every civilization that has risen has tried to break the will of others. They all learned that identity does not yield. Not forever." Dr. Al-Rami added, "And every technology carries cost. Your gifts come weighted with chains. We are not blind to them." Admiral Holt finally spoke, his voice like a blade drawn in a quiet room. "Our fleets will never kneel. Remember that." For a moment, even the alien envoys hesitated, as though unused to such direct defiance. Then the Thaler slammed his plated hand against the deck, sparks scattering from the impact. "Neutrality is impossible. You cannot stand apart. If you refuse, then you will learn the cost of defiance." The Vatan's smile thinned. "Markets close to those who reject contracts. Your trade will choke." The Dravari's voice whispered in every ear at once. "Ignorance breeds ruin. Without us, you will be broken by your own chaos." Elena Varga's reply was quiet but cut like iron. "We choose our chaos. We choose our path. Tell your masters Earth bows to none." The projection cut. Silence filled the chamber, broken only by the faint hum of life support. Outside the windows, the ring shimmered under Marslight, but hidden far away in the asteroid belt, structures glowed faintly where no civilian sensors could see. Massive frames rising slowly within the ice and rock, coded transmissions darting across encrypted lines, pilots training in centrifuges that pushed them past the edge of human endurance. The seeds of defiance, sown long before this day, waited for the shadow that would fall. Admiral Holt leaned close to the president. His voice was low, but every word carried steel. "They think we are unready. Let them believe it a little longer." Elena nodded. "Then when the storm comes, they will discover the mistake they made, and the galaxy will learn who we are." The years that followed the envoy's threat reshaped the solar system. What seemed, on the surface, to be routine expansion of industry and science hid the deliberate weaving of steel into every frontier outpost. The colonies became fortress nodes disguised as ordinary mining and research platforms. Cargo bays were reinforced with armor plates painted to resemble rock. Habitats concealed missile racks under facades of agricultural domes. Civilian freighters carried false manifests, their holds hiding modular batteries that could be bolted into place at short notice. Outwardly, it looked like prosperity. Inwardly, it was preparation. The backbone of communication became the quantum ghost relay system, a network of entangled beacons seeded across the asteroid belt and near the Jovian moons. They could scatter signals, create echoes, and generate phantom traffic that bewildered alien sensors. But they were not without consequence. Civilian transmissions sometimes vanished into static or duplicated into nonsense. One family on Titan reported hearing their daughter's voice call from Europa, though she had never left Saturn's orbit. These disruptions were tolerated, patched by engineers working day and night. When asked, President Varga gave only one explanation: "Every tool has its cost. We must learn to bear it." In the hidden dry docks of Ceres, engineers labored over a project unlike anything humanity had fielded before. The Barnacle drones were small, magnetic, and voracious. Once attached, they could crawl along hull plating, pry into conduits, and disable weapons. But the early prototypes malfunctioned in terrifying ways. On their first live test, half the drones clung not to the derelict hulk prepared for them, but to the very corvette that launched them. A dozen engineers died venting atmosphere, trapped between machines that refused to recognize friend from foe. Still, work continued. The engineers carved names of the dead into the bulkheads of the new production bays, reminders of the price already paid. Pilots endured their own crucible. The micro-interceptors were no larger than shuttles, their acceleration so violent that only the human body, hardened by centrifuge training, could survive the maneuvers. Training programs across Luna and Mars whittled down recruits with merciless efficiency. Some blacked out, some never recovered. Those who remained carried themselves like wire drawn tight, bodies trembling on the edge of exhaustion but spirits unbroken. They painted call signs on their craft, jokes and ancient myths, but behind their bravado lay the unspoken knowledge when the fleets came, they would be the knives darting into the dark. Over the ring of Mars, deception nets unfurled in trials that blanketed whole swaths of space in illusion. Arrays of drones projected ghost signals, false signatures, even mock fleets. The brilliance of the nets came with fragility. Their harmonics shifted with every solar flare, every electromagnetic ripple. Technicians recalibrated ceaselessly, chasing equilibrium that never lasted longer than a week. Still, each success meant that one day, an enemy commander would target phantoms and find his real foes slipping through his blind spots. Refugees brought the most powerful fuel of all, stories. They arrived in battered craft, some so worn their hulls groaned under the lightest burns of entry. One miner from a colony once held by the Vatan Combine staggered into the council chamber with chains still clasped around his wrists. His name was Isak Dorev. He spoke slowly, each word measured as though it cost him to remember. "They said the debt was temporary," he began, eyes hollow. "The Combine gave us machines to dig faster. Promised higher yields meant we'd clear the contracts. But every year they raised the fees. When my wife could not work the quotas, they sold her to another world. My son, he was taken as surety. I tried to fight, and they branded me, marked me defective labor. The overseer told me my freedom was not lost. It had never existed." He paused, gaze sweeping the silent chamber. "Do not believe their promises. Choice is the first thing they strip away." The delegates sat unmoving. Some wept silently. Admiral Holt clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. Dr. Corall leaned forward, her voice carrying across the hall, steady and deliberate. "This is why sovereignty of choice is more than principle. Every nation on Earth, every people, has clawed for it through conquest and rebellion. It is memory written into our bones. When outsiders demand its surrender, they strike at something that cannot be traded away. It is why we resist and why we will endure." The words became a refrain whispered through barracks and classrooms alike. Soldiers carried it etched on plates inside their armor. Children repeated it in school when teachers explained why rations were tightened and lights dimmed to conserve energy for the fleet. It became the compass by which every sacrifice was justified. 5 years after the envoy's threat, the sky above Mars lit once more with the shimmer of alien presence. Not ships this time, but a projection carried across every relay, every screen, every public terminal. The three factions spoke with one voice. The Thaler's booming decree, the Vatan's velvet tone, and the Dravari's haunting whisper overlapped into a single sentence that echoed in every home. "Submit within one cycle, or correction will be imposed upon your colonies. Your choices will end." The ultimatum left no ambiguity. Behind its words lay the threat of extermination, the erasure of everything humanity had built beyond Earth. Elena Varga stood before the assembly that night, her presence broadcast across the system. She did not shout. Her voice was calm, measured, each syllable heavy with intent. "We will not yield, not to force, not to debt, not to the hollow promise of knowledge without identity. We will not surrender choice, for it is the essence of being human. Let them come, they will find a people unbroken." Beneath her words, deep in hidden command centers carved into the rock of Phobos and buried under Europa's ice, coded signals pulsed across encrypted lines. Pilots readied in hangars where engines whispered to life. Engineers armed drones that clung like restless predators to their racks. Deception nets spun into calibration, weaving ghosts in the dark. The time for quiet steel was ending. Operation Veilbreaker would soon begin. The enemy came at dawn, or at least the closest thing to dawn that existed in the black silence above Mars. A ripple of signatures crested out of hyperspace and unfurled like a bronze tide. The Thaler wore banners shone at the front, great speared vessels with armored fins glowing hot from the jump. Behind them stretched the Vaten flotillas, hulking trade hulks bristling with siphon arrays and escort craft painted with corporate insignia. To one side, the pale, bone-white lattice ships of the Dravari conclave spread in geometric formation, their engines humming in eerie unison. Together they numbered nearly 400 ships, an armada assembled not for negotiation but for correction. Alien sensors swept the system. Their first report was almost mocking: weak traffic, sparse mining convoys, no concentrated fleet formations. The admiralty of three empires nodded in agreement, their expectations confirmed. Humanity had no navy worth the name. Their ships were scattered, their colonies vulnerable. Suppression would be swift. They did not understand the ghosts they were chasing. The quantum relays scattered pulses like shattered glass across the void. To Thaler eyes, a single freighter appeared as six, their signals out of sync, some jittering into phantom convoys. Vaten monitors intercepted what seemed to be desperate civilian chatter, but when decrypted, the words looped into nonsense, children's rhymes, fragments of songs, coded in patterns the aliens did not know were deliberate. The Dravari logic engines tried to predict trajectories, but every probability tree split into a forest of contradictions. They saw weakness where there was preparation, disorder where there was design. From the asteroid belt beyond Mars, something stirred. The rocks that drifted silently for eons began to awaken. Panels slid aside, shadows unfolded, and then the first wave came alive. Barnacle drones poured out like swarms of metal locusts. Each was no larger than a man, but together they moved with the hunger of a tide. They clamped onto Thaler hulls, digging claws into bronze plating, their magnetic limbs sparking as they burrowed toward weapon conduits. One by one, pulse lances went dark. On the Vaten trade hulks, barnacles crawled along siphon arrays, chewing cables until great rigs sputtered and died. The Dravari tried to incinerate them with precision arcs, but the drones darted into blind seams, tearing open conduits before detonating themselves in showers of sparks. The second wave struck almost simultaneously. From hidden bays on Phobos and Deimos, micro-interceptors launched in streaks of silver. They were small, viciously fast, little more than engines wrapped around cockpits, but they cut through the void with precision that no alien pilot could match. Humans had trained their bodies for this, hardened through centrifuge agony to endure G-forces that would have pulped others. The interceptors did not aim for hulls. They aimed for the eyes and the voice. Comms arrays shattered under precise bursts. Engines flared out as thrusters were ripped away. Alien formations tried to tighten their defenses, but without eyes or orders, they stumbled, drifting blind while the tiny craft darted among them like wasps striking joints in armor. And then the void itself lied. Deception nets spun illusions across the battlefield. A phantom fleet bloomed to the north, bristling with cruisers that did not exist. The Thaler, bound by doctrine, redirected whole squadrons to face them. Their lances carved nothing but empty dark. Another fleet appeared low and to port, shimmering with fake signatures that tricked Vatan fire control into wasting salvos worth millions of credits. Even the Dravari logic engines hesitated, unable to distinguish true vectors from false harmonics. Inside the command center on Mars's ring, Admiral Holt stood before the holotable, his voice calm, clipped, transmitted across encrypted channels. Delta One, blind their bow. Kites pivot shadow side. Barnacles advance on tertiary hulls. Keep comms clean. Pilots answered with steady tones, their words short and sharp. Delta One copies. Bow array silenced. Kites shifting. Shadow cone in 3. Barnacles attached. Tertiary hulls compromised. The alien fleets, used to rigid hierarchy, struggled. The Thaler captains demanded new orders from their supreme commander before shifting tactics. The Vatan commodores argued over the profitability of pressing forward versus retreat. The Dravari relied on predictive engines that now sputtered in loops of contradiction. Every delay widened the cracks. Human-style AI, seeded into the nets, began to improvise. They weren't gods of calculation like the Dravari logic cores, but they understood chaos. They seeded false commands into enemy channels, tricking captains into thinking they had already given orders. One Thaler cruiser turned its lances against its own escort, convinced it was targeting a phantom. A Vatan hulk vented half its fuel, its overseer believing it had been ordered to dump dead weight. Latency cascaded through the tri-faction ranks, orders contradicting, signals colliding, authority dissolving under the fog of war. On open channels, the human voice broke through. Calm, unyielding. This is Admiral Holt of the Terran Defense Fleet. Surrender and you will be treated under laws of war. Resist and your lives are forfeit. Some alien crews hesitated. A Vatan freighter crew, conscripts bought with false contracts, turned their ship dark and drifted toward Mars under a white flag of power-down beacons. A handful of Dravari scientists, more devoted to survival than doctrine, disengaged their drives and transmitted defection codes. But most clung to command, locked in the pride of empires unwilling to bend to prey. The fight raged on. Human ships burned. Interceptors were shredded by plasma storms, their pilots snuffed out in silence. Barnacle drones fell by the hundreds, vaporized before they reached their targets. A deception net collapsed under concentrated fire, revealing the frigates it had shielded. Holt watched the casualty tallies rise, his face stone. He gave no sign of despair. "Hold the line," he ordered. "Phase 3 and 30. From the asteroid wake, a new swarm ignited. Thousands of drones triggered simultaneously, each small reactor overloading. They vented radiation and static that blinded alien sensors. For a heartbeat, the tri-faction fleet was blind. And in that heartbeat, human interceptors plunged straight through their fractured ranks, crippling engine cores, leaving capital ships adrift. One by one, enemy vessels began to fall silent. Fires spread across bronze hulls, corporate banners crumpled into debris, bone white lattice ships split along fault lines. The void glittered with wreckage and venting reactors, sparks drifting like stars. The final image of the battle burned into every witness, 1,000 cold sparks in the belt wake as enemy reactors went dark, silent tombs floating against the endless black. Humanity had bled for every victory, but Operation Veilbreaker had done what no alien had thought possible. The tri-faction fleet, assembled to teach Earth submission, now lay in ruins. And across the council chambers of the galaxy, whispers began the humans were not prey. They were the wrong enemy to choose. The survivors of the battle were pulled from drifting hulks and shattered lifeboats, their uniforms scorched, their eyes still filled with disbelief. In interrogation rooms carved into the Martian ring, they sat across from human officers who spoke to them not with cruelty but with quiet precision. Again and again, the same confession came. "We believed you were soft, Divided, bound by petty nations and memories of ancient quarrels, we believed you would collapse the moment we pressed. One Thaler commander, his bronze plates cracked and scorched, whispered as though speaking a heresy. We did not fear your weapons. We feared your refusal to follow the pattern. We cannot predict you, and what we cannot predict, we cannot break. Word of the defeat spread like a virus across the stars. Signals reached colonies far beyond the solar system, and with them came rebellion. In the factories of the Vatan Combine, miners rose from their machines and seized the foundries. Overseers fled as workers welded doors shut and raised crude banners declaring themselves free. In laboratories controlled by the Dravari, researchers severed their data streams and defected, carrying priceless archives to neutral ground. Among the Thaler ranks, entire cohorts mutinied. Young conscripts who had been told humanity would be crushed in hours, now turning their weapons against their masters. The shockwave was not measured in casualties or ships destroyed, but in fear turned to courage. The lesson spread faster than any fleet could travel. The tri-faction alliance had been broken, not by matching their might, but by unraveling their certainties. In the wake of this chaos, a new voice reached out to Earth. They arrived not in ships of war, but in vessels of translucent crystal that refracted starlight into rainbows. A species long scattered, refugees who had hidden from empire after empire. They called themselves the Surith. Their emissaries stood in the council chamber of the ring, their bodies glowing faintly as though lit from within. "You have shown us the path," one said, its voice a resonance that filled the chamber like the ringing of glass. "Not by conquest, but by defiance. We have waited for someone to ignite the fracture. Let us join you. Let us coordinate what we could never do alone." In response, Admiral Holt and President Varga articulated what would become known as the Terran Doctrine, three principles etched into every future alliance. "Do not match strength," Holt said. "Rewire the fight." "Break supply, sensors, and story," added Varga. "Win not just the field, but the meaning of the struggle." "Mission trust beats hierarchy," Korol concluded. "Where others wait for orders, we empower each hand, each mind." The doctrine spread, not as law, but as fire. Rebellions across the galaxy adopted it, small fleets improvising with whatever tools they had, breaking their chains not by overwhelming their masters, but by making their authority irrelevant. The empires, bleeding from within and without, were forced to the table. Negotiations dragged on for months, but one truth stood above the rest: they could not continue the war. Not against Earth, not against their own crumbling foundations. The ceasefire that emerged was fragile, but binding. The humans refused to crown themselves victors or emperors. Instead, they pushed for something else: a cooperative framework where each voice, no matter how small, had sovereignty. A network, not a throne, a chorus, not a command. It was imperfect, fragile, even naive. Yet it was more than the galaxy had ever known. When the treaties were signed, Admiral Holt returned to the observation deck of the Martian ring. Alone, he stood at the glass as Mars turned below, its red deserts glowing under the rise of the sun. Light spread across the curve of the planet, then caught the edge of the ring itself, setting its towers ablaze with gold. He breathed slowly, the weight of 5 years and a war balanced on his shoulders. "Freedom is our first weapon," he murmured, not to anyone but to the silence. The words were later engraved on the hulls of human ships and carved into monuments across a dozen liberated worlds. They were not a boast, nor a threat, but a reminder. The weapon was not fleets or drones or deceptive nets. It was the choice to stand, even when the galaxy laughed. "Freedom is our first weapon."